So let's continue from where we stopped at the last time, and let's look a little bit more into stationary lights. But first, let's create a ground to project the shadow on it. I will group those two, move them no. Move them a little bit higher, put a cube, scale it like 10 meters and 10 meters, or maybe 10 meters, 15 meters. Yeah. And then I will rotate this a little bit. And put it, I don't know, here. Turner sun, like so. And then create some, I don't know, another sphere here, a little bit smaller. Or in one, it's better. And then we copy those two again, and we made them movable. And we'll took our light and put it back into static mode for the last time, and build the light. Now we have our light build. So those objects which are movable don't project any shadow as expected. Those project a shadow, and it's a very low resolution shadow. And if we look at the light maps here, I just repeat a little bit what we see in the previous part. We see the light map generated for this level. Here is the shadow on our floor, and the size of the light map is 128 by 138, so it's like 64 by 64, and each face of the cube is here, and this is the floor with two shadows, and this is those are two static spheres, right? And the shadow on the floor is low quality because the light map resolution of this cube is low. So if you look here, 64 for all four sides, and if you look I'm sorry, 6 sides, and if you look here, light map coordinate index 1, you can see that it's laid out like this. There are 6 sides of the cube, and we also can see the resolution directly in the level editor. If you go here and lit, and you choose optimization dual modes, light map density, they will show you this, and this is basically each of these square is the light map pixel. So each of those corresponds to a pixel and this texture, you know. So you can see those pixels are pretty big. And just before I forget it, where this, why this is, we have two light, two UVs, one channel 0 and one channel 1, and why we use channel 1 for the light maps. Well, it's very easy. Your cube normally, it probably has some UVs like those which are not compatible with light mass because they are overlapping. Or all 6 sides are mapped on the same square. And to see that, you can put here light map coordinate index to 0. It will use this UV for the light map. And then now, if I build the light, we'll have some abomination here, like so. You see, it's completely wrong, and you will see here it's wrong because it those UVs in UV channel 0, they're overlapping, and it's actually something that Unreal will do automatically when you import your model with those UVs. It will create you another UV in channel 1 and how to say that, layout them differently. So we'll add spaces and layout each UV shell separately, so there is no overlap. And it's an option when you import your mesh. There is an option called auto generate light map UVs. You can uncheck it and import your own UVs that you made expressly for light map, for light mass by hand. Let's just go back and put one as before, and now it should work. Yep. And the last thing we've seen in the previous part is that not only the light mass will generate the light map, the shadows, the textures for the shadows that goes onto static objects, but it also will generate an invisible texture, 3D texture, that you can visualize here, which is called volumetric light map. So you see those little spheres are the samples of the light, and it's only generated around static objects, because light mass don't see movable objects at all. But those are then used at runtime to illuminate, to lit the movable object. So if, for example, I go here, it's all black, you see those probes, those samples are completely black. So now if I return into lit mode and I move my movable sphere under the floor, you see it's black. Then it becomes lit again. It's because the engine will took those samples and interpolate the light that receives a movable object from dot. And that's all now for those. I will put it back again, hide it, and now let's go and really look at the stationary light. So we'll put that to stationary and build it. Now there's different things you can see. Now it's loaded. So first, those shadows from the static objects on the static objects, they are of different shape, and it looks like Now wh wh when the light is stationary, the engine uses different algorithm to draw them. If you look here, those are more or less the same, but they're like interpolated differently, so they look like a polygon. And another thing that we see here, and it's actually strange, that we have already shadows from movable objects. Those shadows also will disappear. You see, when I go further, but they will not disappear at the same time. Looks like a little shadows disappear first, and then big, then later. But as we've seen in the previous part, those dynamic shadows are cascaded shadow maps, and here we disabled the cascaded shadow maps. Though why we still can see them? That's because they're another kind of dynamic shadows, second type, that are called inset shadows, and that's exactly those we've seen here. It's not cascaded shadow maps, those are inset shadows. And to disable it, I have to enable that and then uncheck the checkbox, and then I can disable it. So now we really don't have any dynamic shadow in our scene at all, at any distance. So if you have this effect, shadow disappearing and reappearing, now you know what it is. Those are those. Now let's look at dynamic shadow, cascaded shadow maps. Let's put the distance at 15 meters. That means those shadows will be visible 15 meters from the camera. You can imagine a plane in front of the camera. When this plane is further, well, the shadow is behind this plane, it will not be shown. And you see, it appears and it disappears, like so, both together. Now it's like if I play here, we'll have our moon and the shadow, and when it go further, disappear. That's the distance of the shadow cascade. So of course we can go and put it to some crazy number, and they will still be here, even at a distance. But you should understand that those dynamic shadows, cascaded shadow maps, they're pretty costly. And for, like, if we have like how much we have, 6 objects in our scene, it's okay. But if we have a real level with thousands of objects, they all need to be rendered twice. Once for the camera, for the player, and once for the shadow. At least, I think, maybe even more. And that will be a lot of draw calls, and that's bad. So you normally don't want to put it too far, but also you don't want them to disappear like that. And there is another third type of shadow that we will see that makes it possible. But first, let's see something else. Let's see those shadows from the static objects. And if I put dynamic shadow distance to 0, you see we're back to baked version. It's low poly. And if I put here my 15 meters, let's put 10 meters. back, I have good quality shadows. So which it means? It means that cascaded shadow maps will be applied also to static shadows. They will make them better quality. And then when I go back, you can see instead of disappearing completely, those shadows will just go to baked version. You see the difference? And on the other two. And that's pretty cool. Now let's go back to this. Now the last shadow I know, last dynamic shadow. It's a dynamic shadow that is less precise than cascaded shadow maps, because you can see cascaded shadow maps really are very precise, but also less costly to draw. And it's called distance field shadows. It's here. Now I will enable it, and as you can see, nothing disappears anymore at any distance. Both static and dynamic objects will still have shadow. And if I put here, it goes up to 300 meters. So if I put something like 40 meters, just to see it better, you can see it behaves like cascaded shadow maps. It disappears, and our static shadows will go back to the baked version. But you can see from this distance it already looks much better. But as I said, those are not really costly, so it's okay to put them to, like here, 300 meters. And well, what Unreal will do in this configuration, it will from 0 to 15 meters use cascaded shadow maps, and from 15 meters to 300 meters use distance field shadows. And as you remember, we disabled those inset shadows. We can re-enable it, so we have all three kind of dynamic shadows and the baked shadows too in our scene. But see, there's this nasty artifact from the inset shadows, so let's just disable them. Now about those distance field shadows. They are not enabled by default in the engine, and to use them you need to go in your project settings, I believe, and rendering, and here search for it. Okay, yeah, engine rendering, lighting, generate mesh distance field. You have to check it. By default it's not checked, and when you check it you have to restart the engine, and then it will generate those distance field shadows, because those distance field shadows are like a texture that is generated around the object, the sphere, and you can see it here. It's invisible. It's a little bit like those volumetric light map probes we've seen before. You can see it again in the visualizer and mesh distance field. Those gray ticks that you see, those are distance fields, and those are used to calculate shadows dynamic shadows quickly, and they have different parameters that are defined for each mesh separately. Like here, it's in load and build settings. You have this field destination. Sorry, distance field resolution scale 2, and it will if you put that to 0, it will just disable distance fields. So you see, I don't anymore have any distance field from the floor. And if I put it to 1, you see I have again this distance field, but look very strange. Then, and here you have these artifacts, and I put it to 2. Sorry, it was before. Then I have my scene here again like before, and yeah, let's turn them off. And those distance fields are stored together with the mesh in a texture, in a 3D texture. Here you can see the size of this texture. It's 30 by 30 by 30, and it took 100 kilobytes. So they cost some texture memory cost, but they don't cost the draw calls when you have to show them, and you can show them from a great distance. You see, that works. Well, that is for those shadows, and I hope next time I can speak about skylight. Thank you for watching.